The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, slicing through the silence of my empty house like a warning shot. I froze, my heart hammering, as if the world outside knew the secret I'd buried deep inside. I wasn't ready for anyone to step into my life. Not today, not ever, but the internet guy was here, and I had no choice but to answer. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 27, living in a sleepy Virginia suburb where picket fences and polite nods hide 1,000 unspoken judgments. My life was a carefully curated lie. A tech job, I work from home, a tidy lawn, a smile for the neighbors. But inside, I was suffocating, trapped by the fear of who I really was. The world didn't need to know I was gay. Not my parents, not my coworkers, not even the mirror I avoided every morning. The doorbell rang again. I forced myself to the door, pulling it open to find him. He was maybe my age, with tousled blonde hair and a crooked smile that hit me like a punch. His name tag read Caleb, and his blue eyes sparkled with a warmth that made my chest tighten. "Hey, I'm here to set up your internet," he said, his voice easy, like he belonged here. I nodded, mute, and stepped aside, my pulse racing for reasons I didn't want to name. Caleb moved through my house with a quiet confidence, his toolbox clinking softly as he knelt by the router in my living room. I hovered nearby, pretending to check emails on my phone, but my eyes kept drifting to him. The way his fingers worked the cables, precise and steady, felt like a performance I wasn't supposed to watch. "Nice place," he said, glancing up. "You live here alone?" "Yeah," I muttered, my throat dry. "Just me." "Must get quiet," he said, not pushing, but his tone carried a curiosity that made me squirm. I shrugged, avoiding his gaze, and he went back to his work. But the air felt charged, like static before a storm. I didn't know why his presence unsettled me. Or maybe I did, and that was the problem. As Caleb tested the connection, he started talking, small things like the weather, the traffic, the way Virginia summers clung to your skin. His voice was a lifeline, pulling me out of my head. I found myself answering, hesitant at first, then easier. He laughed at my dry joke about my neighbor's obsession with lawnmowers, and the sound was so genuine it made my chest ache. When was the last time I'd laughed with someone? "All right, you're all set," he said after an hour, standing and brushing dust off his jeans. "Anything else you need?" His eyes lingered on mine, just a second too long, and I felt it, a spark, dangerous and alive. I shook my head, muttering thanks, and walked him to the door. But as he stepped onto the porch, he turned back. "Hey, Ethan, if you ever want to grab a coffee or something, I'm around." My breath caught. Was he just being friendly? Or was there something more in the way his smile tilted, in the way his gaze held mine? I managed to nod, my voice lost, and watched him drive away in his van. The house felt emptier than before, but something else lingered, a possibility I wasn't ready to face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Caleb's number, scribbled on the service receipt, sat on my kitchen counter like a dare. I picked it up, put it down, paced the floor. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, convincing myself I was safer alone. But his smile had cracked something open, and I was terrified of what might spill out. The next morning, I texted him. Just a simple, "Thanks for the setup. Coffee sounds good." My hand shook as I hit send. His reply came within minutes. "Sweet. Tomorrow at 3? There's a spot downtown, Brew and Bean." I stared at the screen, my world tilting. I'd said yes to something I'd sworn I'd never do. Brew and Bean was a cozy cafe, all exposed brick and soft jazz, the kind of place where people lingered too long. Caleb was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a latte, his smile as disarming as yesterday. "You made it," he said, like it was a victory. I slid into the seat across from him, my nerves buzzing. We talked for hours about music, movies, the way he'd grown up in a small Ohio town, not unlike mine. He was open, unguarded, telling stories about his chaotic family with a fondness that made me jealous. I shared bits of my life, careful to skirt the edges of my truth. But Caleb had a way of listening, really listening, that made me want to tell him everything. As the sun dipped low, painting the cafe in gold. He leaned forward. You seem like you're carrying something heavy, Ethan. Want to share the load? His voice was soft, not pushing, but it hit me like a tidal wave. I froze, my coffee cup trembling in my hands. For a moment, I wanted to tell him, I'm gay, I'm scared, I don't know how to live like this, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I mumbled something about work stress and changed the subject. When we parted ways, he hugged me. A quick, warm embrace that left me reeling. Text me, okay? He said, and I nodded, my heart a mess of hope and fear. As I walked home, the Virginia air thick with summer, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But the fear was still there whispering. What happens when he finds out who you really are? Over the next week, Caleb became a constant in my life. A text here, a call there, each one pulling me closer to a line I'd never dared cross. We met again at Brew and Bean, then at a park, then at a diner where the waitress knew his order by heart. Every moment with him was a battle between wanting to lean in and wanting to run. Caleb was different from anyone I'd known. He was unapologetically himself, with a laugh that filled a room and a way of making you feel seen. But the more I liked him, the louder my fears grew. What if he wasn't like me? What if he was, and I wasn't ready? I'd spent so long hiding, I didn't know how to stop. One evening, he invited me to his place, a small apartment on the edge of town, cluttered with vinyl records and half-read books. Welcome to my chaos, he said, grinning as he handed me a beer. We sat on his couch, talking about everything and nothing, the air between us crackling with something unspoken. Then, out of nowhere, he said, You ever feel like you're hiding from yourself, Ethan? My heart stopped. I stared at him, searching for a safe answer, but his eyes held mine, steady and kind. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. Then he reached for my hand, his fingers brushing mine, and I didn't pull away. The warmth of his touch was electric, terrifying, perfect. I like you, Ethan, he said softly. Not just as a friend. The words hung there, raw and real, and I felt my world split open. I wanted to say it back, to tell him I felt the same, but fear clamped down hard. Instead, I squeezed his hand, my silence louder than words. That night, I left his apartment in a daze, my mind a storm of what-ifs. I liked Caleb, God, I more than liked him, but admitting it meant dismantling the life I'd built. The safe, lonely life where no one could hurt me. By the time I got home, I was shaking, torn between longing and dread. The next day, I avoided his texts, and the day after that, guilt gnawed at me, but fear was stronger. I told myself it was better this way, that I was protecting us both. But then, on the third day, he showed up at my door. Ethan, what's going on? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. He stood on my porch, the same porch where we'd first met, and I felt exposed, like he could see every secret I'd try to bury. Did I push too far? No, I said, my voice cracking. It's not you. It's me. The cliché burned, but it was true. I wanted to let him in, but the walls I'd built were too high. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. Then talk to me, he said. I'm not going anywhere. I took a shaky breath and let him inside. We sat on my couch, the silence heavy. Finally, I spoke, my voice trembling. I'm gay, Caleb, and I'm terrified. I've never let myself feel this before. The words felt like glass, cutting as they came out, but they were free, and so was I, just a little. Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He just reached for my hand again, his grip steady. Thank you for telling me, he said. And for what it's worth, I'm gay too. I've been out since I was 19. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Relief flooded me, but so did panic. Being honest with Caleb was one thing. Being honest with the world was another. I told him about my parents, devout and traditional, who'd never accept me. About the coworkers I'd overheard mocking people like that. About the fear that had kept me locked away for years. He listened, never interrupting, his hand a quiet anchor. When I finished, he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. You don't have to do this alone, he whispered. And then he kissed me, soft, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. I kissed him back, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. But the world outside my door wasn't ready for us. The next week, we went to a movie, sitting close in the dark, our hands intertwined. As we left the theater, laughing about the terrible plot, a group of guys passed us. One of them sneered, muttering something ugly under his breath. Caleb tensed, but he didn't let go of my hand. I did. The shame burned, and I hated myself for it. "I'm sorry," I said later, back at my place. I panicked. "It's okay," Caleb said, but his voice was tight. "It's not easy, Ethan. But hiding who you are, it's not living." His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I wanted to be brave like him, but courage felt like a foreign language I hadn't learned. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk between bliss and terror. Caleb and I were falling for each other, hard and fast, our days filled with stolen moments, late-night talks, walks through empty parks, his hand in mine when no one was looking. But every step toward him was a step toward a truth I wasn't sure I could face. One night, he took me to a bar on the outskirts of town, a place he called safe. It was a dimly lit dive, packed with people who didn't care who you loved, only that you showed up as yourself. Caleb knew half the room, greeting friends with easy hugs and introducing me as his guy. The pride in his voice made my heart soar, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, judged, exposed. We danced that night, his arms around me, the music drowning out my doubts. For a few hours, I was free to love him, to be seen, to exist without fear. But as we left, a man outside the bar spat at us, his words venomous. "Faggots," he snarled, and I froze, the words slicing through me like a blade. Caleb pulled me away, his jaw tight, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. I hadn't stood up for us. I hadn't said a word. Back at his apartment, I broke down. "I'm not strong like you," I said, tears burning my eyes. "I want to be, but I'm not." Caleb knelt in front of me, his hands on my knees. "You don't have to be strong all at once," he said. "You just have to keep going, one step at a time." He wiped my tears, his touch gentle, and I clung to him, desperate for his certainty. But the world kept testing me. At work, I overheard a colleague ranting about the gay agenda, his voice dripping with disgust. I wanted to speak up, to tell him he was wrong, but my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. I texted Caleb instead, venting my frustration, and he replied with a simple, "You're enough, Ethan, just as you are." His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the shame of my silence. Then came the dinner with my parents. I hadn't seen them in months, avoiding their calls because I knew they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. But Caleb encouraged me to go, to face them, even if I wasn't ready to tell the truth. "You don't have to come out," he said. "Just be there. Show them you're still you." The dinner was torture. My parents' house was a shrine to tradition. Crosses on the walls, a Bible on the coffee table. They asked about my job, my life, their voices warm but probing. When my mom mentioned setting me up with a nice girl from church, I nearly choked. I wanted to tell them about Caleb, about the man who made me feel alive, but the words stayed locked inside. Instead, I smiled and nodded, hating myself with every breath. When I told Caleb about it, he didn't judge me. He just listened, his hands squeezing mine. "It's okay to be scared," he said, "but you can't keep living for them. You deserve to live for you." His words hit hard, stirring something fierce inside me. I wanted to be the man he saw, the one who wasn't afraid to love him out loud. A few days later, Caleb invited me to a Pride event in Richmond. I hesitated, my stomach twisting at the thought of being so visible. But his excitement was infectious, and I said yes, wanting to prove to myself, and to him, that I could do this. The event was a riot of color and sound, people of all kinds celebrating who they were. Caleb held my hand, pulling me through the crowd, his smile brighter than the sun. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But then I saw them, protesters on the sidelines, holding signs that screamed hate. Their words were a knife, cutting through the joy around me. I froze, my hand slipping from Caleb's. He noticed, his face falling, but he didn't push. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, but I wasn't. The protesters' voices echoed in my head, mixing with my parents' expectations, my coworkers' sneers, my own fear. I wanted to be brave, to stand tall beside Caleb, but I felt like I was drowning. When we got back to his place, I told him I needed space. His eyes darkened with hurt, but he nodded. "Take what you need," he said. "I'll be here." I went home and cried, the weight of my cowardice crushing me. I loved Caleb, but love wasn't enough. Not when I was too scared to live it. For days, I avoided him, burying myself in work, trying to forget the way his smile made me feel. But the silence was worse than the fear. I missed him, his laugh, his touch, the way he made me believe I could be more. The silence stretched on, a chasm between me and Caleb that I didn't know how to bridge. I'd push him away, not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't know how to love him without losing myself. Every night, I stared at my phone, his last text, "I'm here when you're ready," burning a hole in my heart. One evening, I found myself at Brew and Bean, sitting in the same spot where we had our first coffee. The barista recognized me, asking where my friend was, and I mumbled something vague, my chest tight. I was running out of excuses, out of reasons to keep hiding. I wanted Caleb back, but I didn't know if I was brave enough to deserve him. Then fate, or maybe something else, intervened. My internet crashed, a cruel irony that forced me to call the service company. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Caleb, his toolbox in hand, his smile hesitant but warm. "Guess I'm your tech guy again," he said, and I laughed, the sound surprising me. He worked quietly, but the air between us was heavy with everything unsaid. When he finished, he didn't leave. Instead, he sat on my couch, looking at me with those blue eyes that saw too much. "Ethan, what's going on?" he asked. "You shut me out, and I don't know why." I took a deep breath, the truth clawing its way out. "I'm scared, Caleb. Scared of what it means to be with you. Scared of what people will think, what my family will do. I love you, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to live like this." The words spilled out, raw and messy, and I braced for him to walk away. But he didn't. He moved closer, his hand finding mine. "I'm scared too," he said. "Every time I walk out the door holding someone's hand, I wonder if it's safe. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." His voice broke, and I realized he was fighting for us, for me, in a way I hadn't dared to fight for myself. I kissed him then, desperate and fierce, pouring everything I couldn't say into that moment. He kissed me back, his hands cupping my face, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was hiding. When we pulled apart, I was crying, but so was he, and we laughed through the tears, holding each other like we could keep the world at bay. The next day, I made a decision. I called my parents and asked to meet. At their house, I sat them down, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm gay, and I'm in love with someone." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. My mom gasped, her hand flying her mouth. My dad's face hardened, but he didn't speak. The silence was deafening. Then my mom started crying, not out of anger, but confusion. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" she asked, and I realized she wasn't rejecting me. Not yet. My dad stood and left the room, his silence louder than any words. I left their house feeling raw, but lighter. I'd done it. I'd told the truth. When I told Caleb, he pulled me into his arms, his pride in me shining brighter than any fear. "You're braver than you know," he said, and for the first time, I started to believe him. But the world wasn't done testing us. A week later, I got a call from my boss. Someone at work had seen me at the Pride event, and rumors were spreading. He didn't fire me, but his tone was cold, warning me to keep my personal life out of the office. I hung up, my hands shaking, but Caleb was there, reminding me I wasn't alone. We started building a life together, piece by piece. We went to more events, held hands in public, faced the stares and whispers with defiance. Some days were harder than others. My dad still hadn't spoken to me, and the office gossip didn't stop, but Caleb's love was a shield, steady and sure. One night, lying in bed, I traced the lines of his face, memorizing every detail. "What if I'd never texted you?" I asked, my voice soft. He smiled, his eyes crinkling. "I'd have kept showing up at your door until you did." And I knew he meant it. Months passed, and Caleb and I grew stronger, our love a quiet rebellion against a world that wasn't always kind. My dad finally called, his voice gruff but softer than before. "I don't understand it," he said, "but you're my son." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. My mom started asking about Caleb, tentative but curious, and I felt a flicker of hope that one day they'd see him the way I did. At work, the rumors faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of my coding projects. I stopped hiding who I was, mentioning Caleb in passing, letting my truth slip into conversations. Some colleagues pulled away, but others surprised me, offering support in quiet ways. A smile, a question about my weekend, a refusal to let hate win. Caleb and I moved in together, turning his cluttered apartment into our home. We fought sometimes about my hesitancy, his stubborn optimism, but we always found our way back to each other. One evening, as we sat on our couch, surrounded by his records and my books, he took my hand. "I want to marry you someday," he said, his voice steady. "Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready." I froze, not out of fear, but awe. I'd spent so long running from myself. I'd never dared dream of a future like this. "I'm ready to start thinking about it," I said, and his smile was brighter than any sunset. We kissed, the world outside fading away, and I knew I'd found my home. Not in a place, but in him. The next summer, we went back to the Pride event in Richmond, hand in hand, no hesitation. The protesters were there again, their signs just as ugly, but this time I didn't flinch. I looked at Caleb, his face glowing with defiance and love, and I felt it, courage, real and unshakable. We danced in the street, surrounded by a community that had become ours, and I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Looking back, I see it clearly. Caleb didn't just install my internet that day. He wired me to a life I'd been too afraid to claim. He showed me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a fight, a promise to keep showing up, no matter how hard it gets. I was terrified of what it meant to love him, to be seen, to be me. But with every step we took together, I learned that fear is just the shadow of something worth having. And as we stood there, under a sky bursting with color, I knew I was connected. Not just to Caleb, but to myself in ways I'd never dared hope. The world wasn't perfect, and neither were we, but we were enough. More than enough.